So welcome to our 4:30 session entitled Considerations for Deployment of Passkeys by Financial Institutions. As a reminder, for those of you here in person or those of you at home, please add this session to your calendar and try to ask questions through the app. That way we can get everyone all at once. Then if we have added time at the end, for those in site, we could do live Q&A as well. So with that, I'm happy to turn things over to Pedro Martinez from Talus. He's a business owner for Digital Banking Access. Pedro.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, so 4:30 in the afternoon, second day, so it's getting a lot of presentations behind us, so I'll try to entertain a little bit. I'll do my best on that. So for all of us who are old enough to remember how things were 30 years ago or even 40 years ago, it is remarkable how we have seen technology evolve, our daily usage of technology evolve, no? How things have changed so much over these years. And yet there is one thing that we haven't seen evolve in all this time at all, which is that our main means for authenticating to digital services after all this time continues to be based on the same username and password. So if you look at how were services that we were logging in 30, 35 years ago, and how are services that, no pun intended to any of these examples, because you would find the same thing with anything else, these are examples of services, whether they are banking services or else. We continue to log in essentially in the same way as so long ago. So all of us who are involved with FIDO Alliance and that we have been following, we know that there is a lot of work that has been ongoing over the last 10 years in order to make things change. But this all was happening, let's say, under the radar for most people, no? For consumers in particular, no? So I would say, having been part of this exercise, having participated in the FIDO Alliance, we really believed in the technology, but I would say it was last year, mid last year, when we arrived to the conclusion that this was going to happen and that finally we were going to see passwords going away and passkeys finally replacing that, changing this very long habit for all of us. And we started to hit the road and go see our customers and share with them the information that we were gathering, and also to gather their feedback, and particularly being financial institutions in our case, we wanted also to gather their feedback because there were some particular considerations. But what was very striking at the beginning was that it was an information difficult to process, no? Because these passwords that have been so prevalent, I will try, as Pam did, to use some kind of an analogy to explain what we are seeing here, because not on this world, but in the world of digital service, of banking, of digital services in general, of internet, no? Passwords have been dominating this world forever. They are kind of these dinosaurs that dominate this worldwide world. And there has been nothing that we have been able to do about it. We have get accustomed to live around them and sometimes get bitten or eaten by them. But the reality is that they are scary beasts. They are scary beasts, and if you think that I am exaggerating, the only thing that you have to do is take your own phones, whether it is an Android or an iPhone, and go and check on the password settings, check on the notifications that you have, on the warning messages you have about passwords that you are using and that have been hacked, and to see how really scary this plague is. Well, this is the world that we have lived in, and as we were communicating with customers, we realized that we were telling them this is going to come to an end, and yeah, it's an information that it was hard to process, that this really is going to happen, that this is going to happen. And we were doing this exercise, talking with customers during the second half of 2022, and that was no long after one movie that you probably have seen came out, which was Don't Look Up. And when we were having those meetings, I was somehow having the impression of Leonardo DiCaprio being in front of an audience and telling them that something very big was going to happen, and people just not believing in them. And so it made me think that it is as if we found out at some point, we found out mid last year that there was an asteroid that was about to hit in our World Wide Web world. We understood that it was going to hit and that it was going to have a great impact. It was actually going to drive passwords to extinction. And out of that, it would come out with a new era. We would be ending with that era of those password dinosaurs, and we would come out with a new era, the era of passkeys. But it was a message that it was hard to fathom and hard to believe. So anyway, this is just a way of waking you up after the break. But the reality is that, yes, we are convinced that this is going to happen, and this is the message that we were bluntly going and communicating to customers. This is the message. Listen, passkeys are going to kill passwords. It's going to happen fast, and it has already started to happen. And when we were having these meetings with security architects or with people on the digital services, we faced objections, and we faced some questions. It's normal. I mean, this is something that we have been living with for all our life. How is this going to happen now out of the blue for many people, no? Well, we were telling them that this was inevitable, and we tell them, look, we can justify you why. The passkeys are going to beat passwords because they are great. And say, well, okay, I mean, that's not a real argument. But yes, they are great. They are great because they provide a great user experience. They are great because they provide much greater security, and that is something that they have started to listen at. You are going to end up with one major problem, everything that is related to phishing. We have been talking about this a lot. And you are going to end up with all the problems related to massive data breaches on the server side, which is also a big concern for companies. Well, that begins to be interesting. But it's not only about security or user experience. We are also going to reduce costs. You're going to have a monetary impact, very immediate, through reduction of your cost of customer care. Well, that's fine. Well, you have found a technological solution that makes things better, but that is no guarantee that something is going to happen, right? You are right. This is not the only reason why this is going to happen. This is going to happen because on top of being providing value, we have seen the commitment of the companies that manage our devices, the consumer devices that we use to access the internet, to the point that by the end of 2022, we have every single PC or mobile or tablet equipped and ready to implement this technology natively. And not only that, we have the support at the browser level so that any type of web service can benefit of this technology for authentication. Well, okay, so this begins to be something. And not only that, we have the proof now because we have very big services that are deploying passkeys very massively. So we have a bunch of service providers that have started, and now, as we arrive to this instance of 1 year later of the Authenticate conference, we have now passkeys by the billions released in the market. So our customers were starting with a certain prudence with respect to that, but at the end of all those arguments, they were starting to believe that this was going to happen. Now that they have assumed the next question that they had is, okay, so what for us? We are financial institutions. We have some particular requirements. So what for us? Well, we had to dig with them into the different types of passkeys. And the first thing to talk about when it comes to the type of passkeys is where can you have those passkeys stored? So the most obvious answer to that is in the platform. So that's what the end users are going to have available. There is nothing to be done, native support, so that is perfect. But it's not the only place where you can be hosting your passkeys. You have two more options. One is, as a bank, as a financial institution, as any service provider, in fact, you can be managing passkeys from your mobile apps. That's another alternative. Sorry. And you have a third option, which is hardware devices. Now, with these three options in mind, we have to look at what is the special characteristic that have the passkeys on platforms, because that is a concern for a number of banks. Well, on platforms, we know that what is special is that passkeys synchronize to the corresponding platform provider's cloud. And that means that whenever you are creating a passkey, it's created following the FIDO standard. So you have the key pair, private key, and public key are created on the device. In this case, my iPhone, for example. The public key is going to be provisioned into the FIDO authentication server that is managed. It's owned by the service provider, by the bank in this case. And then we have the second part, which is the synchronization part that is managed by the platform itself. The private key, the passkey, in fact, is going to be synchronized to the corresponding cloud. And from there, it's going to propagate to the rest of the devices that I may have on the same platform. So if I am an iOS user, an iCloud user, and I have an iPhone, an iPad, and a MacBook, all these three devices will be having the same passkey on. Okay. Well, from the perspective of financial institutions, from the perspective of any service providers, so the pros of these synchronizations are obvious. No, you just need to enroll. You just need to enroll once, and moreover, we are solving the big issue that we have gone through many times, which is about recovery of the account in case that is necessary. But on the other side, from the perspective of financial institutions, you have some particular issues. The first one is that they don't feel comfortable necessarily with the fact they consider that the credentials the credentials are a bond between the user and the service provider, and many banks, in this case, don't feel comfortable with the fact that they have to provide a role in that relationship to a third party. Well, that is something that can be debatable if it is or not, but it is something that we see quite a bit. On the other side, there is a more tangible argument against, and this is the fact that in regulations such as PSD2 in Europe, for a secure authentication, for a secure customer authentication to be considered such, you expect a clear device binding of the possession factor, meaning whenever you have a credential, a passkey in this case, you expect that it is going to provide a unique bond between the service provider, the user, and the device that he is using. But in the case of synchronized passkeys, that bond is lost, because that passkey that can be shared from the iPhone that I have used to create it to my iPad or my MacBook, in the end is proof of possession of what? You could say that in the end, the only thing that it's proving is that I control my own iCloud account, but not much more than that, no? So from that perspective, that is problematic. And even if, and I think that this was mentioned yesterday in the session by Rolf, there has not been any official statement, for example, in the case of PSD2 from the European Banking Association, the perception today is that synced passkeys are not going to be acceptable as a strong authentication token. Well, so does it mean that banks cannot rely on passkeys? Well, let's look into that. So we have seen that these type of passkeys have many benefits as a replacement of passwords. But there is an alternative to that. Remember that there is not only the passkeys that are stored on platforms, we have the possibility of storing passkeys also on cards and tokens, and especially in the case of banks for B2C, on the mobile apps. So you can manage passkeys directly from the mobile app. And so if you implement support for FIDO and passkeys through an SDK, for example, inside the bank mobile application, what you achieve is that you don't need to rely on the OS of that device to manage the passkeys. So that is done by the app itself. And so for the OS, even if you leverage the device's capacities and the device resources for storing the secrets, the OS is not going to see those credentials as passkeys. It's going to see it as cryptographic objects that you are requiring to store in a secure container. They will not be identified as a passkeys, and hence they will not be synchronized into the cloud. And not being synchronized into the cloud, those passkeys are going to be device-bound passkeys, and thus they are fully compliant with regulations such as PSD2. So it is possible for a bank to have banking-grade or regulation-grade passkeys as far as they are managing from their app. That is a possibility. So we have to distinguish between the two types and the two purposes. Password replacement on one side and regulatory compliance, strong authentication on the other side. So with that, what is it that we think is the path for short-term implementation of passkeys? Well, this is our view on passkeys. On one side, we have, for password replacement, we have synced passkeys managed by the platforms. And on the other side, for strong authentication, for multi-factor authentication, we have device-bound passkeys that can be managed either through the mobile app or through hardware tokens. All of them are going to be FIDO compliant. All of them are going to rely with any kind of backend which is FIDO certified. And the way for us, for banks to benefit from these two types of passkeys is as follows, and this is our recommendation to our customers. If, as a bank, and as we have seen on examples, and as you can see on many examples that you deal with every day, if a bank is relying, even if it is partially, on passwords for authentication of their users, there is only benefits for them to consider the migration from this solution that is poor security and poor user experience to a solution based on passkeys. Replacing passwords for passkeys is going to improve both the security and the user experience of that solution. No doubt whatsoever, it is a no-brainer replacing password for passkeys or enabling passkeys so that as many users as possible are going to be leaning towards using this technology. It has only benefits. Now, as we have seen, this may not meet the requirements for a strong authentication grade compliant for the financial industry, which is why there are two paths for banks. The first one is that if a bank implements synced passkeys, platform-based passkeys, as replacement of passwords, that is something that is absolutely compatible with them keeping whatever it is that they have today in place as a solution for a strong authentication. You can go, and whenever you would be presenting your password in your current scheme, you can be using passkeys instead. And if your system included some other mechanism that was approved for a strong authentication, whatever it was, whether it was through your mobile app or push notification through your mobile app, or anything that was acceptable from a regulation standpoint, that can continue to be used exactly, no need for any kind of modification, right away to achieve that compliance. So you are replacing passwords by passkeys, and you continue to use your strong authentication mechanisms that you would have on top of that. Now, that allows for a very smooth introduction of passkeys technology for password replacement, combining with whatever you have in place. Once you have done that, you might find yourselves having a legacy infrastructure for a strong authentication, maybe based on OTP or magic links or whatever, and a new infrastructure that you have put in place and that you are using only for password replacement. Well, at some point, at your own pace, that's a matter of project management on the side of the bank, they can consider that they can rationalize and reuse that infrastructure, that backend that they have now for authentication based on passkeys, also for a strong authentication by implementing on their mobile app, for example, that layer through an SDK of FIDO so that they can be combining as well and using passkeys on the app to have banking grade security. That is an option. And of course, for other type of use cases or for enterprise, for employee management, you can as well use hardware tokens that provide you as well that device bound, but that is for another type of use cases more on the B2C side. Okay, so that is essentially the conclusion. That is our view today. We know that there is work and that FIDO Alliance will continue to work in order to come with new solutions but it doesn't preclude financial institutions to deploy passkeys already today and take benefit of them. That's our conclusion.
Pedro, thank you. So we have some questions.
Sorry?
We have questions. Stay put. We have some questions for you. My first question was, in my opening keynote, I said that it's not going to happen overnight, getting rid of passwords, and you say they will happen very quickly. Passwords are going away like faster than we think, is your response.
Yes, no, okay, so that slide is a slide that we started to use in the second half of the year as we were starting to meet with our customers, and it was a provocative slide that we were putting on purpose, and typically we would go to a customer, or I would go in my case. I don't typically go. I don't have the day-to-day, so these are customers that wouldn't know me, and as I would be taken there to talk and to explain them a little bit about this new technology coming, and the idea was to provoke a little bit to generate a reaction, no? And we could see some people just backing up, and then go through the explanation, just get them, and then bring them at ease. But yes, I mean, it's going to happen fast. When we are saying it's going to happen fast, the introduction, getting rid completely of passwords to the point that there will no longer be, that's obviously going to take time. But getting passkeys being rolled out, we think is going to happen very fast. Yep. We see a big difference between what was beginning of 2023 and what is the end of 2023. Because at the beginning of 2023, we were meeting customers that were pretty much, in some cases, hearing about passkeys for the first time. And by the end of the year, what we see is a lot of requisitions and RFPs that are starting to coming up, specifically asking for this technology to deploy.
I agree. Okay, we have time for one more quick question. You have a lot of questions, by the way. This is the most I've seen for any talk. It's a security-related question. There's a couple of people hitting on this. Basically, friendly fraud. So if someone from my household, can someone from my household use the passkeys in my device if they gain access to my device? So if someone has my PIN on my phone at home, what happens? How do you prevent friendly, fraudulent logins?
There are things that are very hard to prevent. There are things that have a different solution. So obviously, people that is having access to your devices that can eventually even enroll biometrics on your own devices. So you can be suffering from that. But the question is not are we getting rid of all the risk? The question is Are we in a better place that we find ourselves today with passwords? Because whatever the risk that you can be finding is still related to passkeys, you can, I'm sure that you can find that risk as well. So you will be suppressing a lot of risk. You will not be adding any risk when you are moving to passkeys. But
Okay. We have time for one more question. Delineation, which I think is important, because I thought the way you laid out the difference between device-bound passkeys and sync passkeys is really good. Question here is, what happens if you lose a device-bound passkey? How do you recover that? And the answer is?
well, yes, I think that it was. I liked a lot the presentation that we saw earlier. I think it was from Amazon that was making the flow. No, you're starting with identity verification, and then you are going through enrollment of credentials. And then you're going into authentication, and eventually you have to go to recovery and back to identity verification. It's the same situation. We have lived it for a long time. When you are talking about device-bound credentials, yes, whenever you are losing those credentials, you are going to have to come back to some backup mechanisms, as it is already the case today. It's not something that is specific to passkeys technology or to FIDO. We suffer it whenever you are creating that binding.
Okay, super. Pedro, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And with you?
I'll go.